As everyone, I will thank the organizers of this conference. It is lovely to be here, and we were discussing this earlier. It's so great to find people from all these different fields in a smaller setting, which is also more inducive for longer conversations, and that is lovely. So this talk is, I think, a perfect follower for Marie's talk, and yes, we are going to bring you to Switzerland again. This is obviously the Alps, the Upper Rhone Valley that Marie has mentioned extensively by now, where we find the Petit Chasseur megalithic necropolis. And Martin Verholt yesterday mentioned post-processualism and studies that are at a very local scale, and this is very much what this is. So this presentation concludes a 4-year project that was funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation between 2017 and 2021, led by Marie-Bess. That included 6 institutions from 3 countries, and that was centered on the pottery and the Beakers phenomenon. So you've seen this map already now. This is the necropolis of Petit Chasseur at the heart of this project. It was discovered in the 1960s, extensively excavated, famous for its triangular shaped dolmens and anthropomorphic stelae. And as I was going to say, and Marie showed this as well, the site is a gift that keeps on giving. We have renewed discoveries even in the latest years, so a lot more stuff to study. And as it was already mentioned, it has a very long phase of occupation between the late 4th millennium and roughly 1600 BCE, covering the pre-Bell Beaker, final Neolithic, Bell Beaker period, and the early Bronze Age. So the counterpart to the necropolis are the settlements, which have much shorter occupation phases. And in this, for this study, we selected 13 domestic sites scattered across the valley that cover these 3 periods during which the necropolis was in use. As you can see, we have a strong concentration around the site of Petit Chasseur as well. So the area covered by the study is quite small, but it also forms a very coherent space to study. It is a valley that is enclosed by mountains, but more importantly, it was an area characterized by mobility and cultural contacts due to its crucial location for alpine crossings. And here I've given 2 examples that are quite well known. We have the discoveries of the Schneidioch Pass, including this, I know now that laser doesn't work, but let's try it, no. With this very impressive birch bark bow case that was discovered on this pass during the melting of the ice. And here a representation of what Schneidi is believed to have looked like. And then in Zermatt, the Alphermeti shelter. So we know that people are crossing these mountains through several passes, and in the middle is the Upper Rhone Valley and the necropolis of Sion-Petit Chasseur. So as you can see on these maps, so we have a tectonic map on the left and a mineralogical map on the right. This region is also characterized by a geological variety and complexity, contrary to other regions where it's all very similar everywhere. The Alps, Delia knows it really well, are extremely complex in that regard. But they also offer many opportunities for raw material sourcing. Here we've highlighted 2 of the main crystalline massifs that were of importance in this study, the Mont Blanc Massif and the Ar Massif on the northeast. So the project was divided into 2 PhD theses with the aim to cover the complete ceramic chaîne opératoire, from raw material procurement to finished products, studying the assemblages from the necropolis and the ones from the 13 settlements. for Delia's work, there were 4 core analytical tasks during her PhD. The main was the macroscopic observation of the full corpus in terms of paste characteristics and the inclusions. And then for a subset of 179 samples, she performed 5 archimetric analyses, including polarizing microscope analysis with ChemScan, X-ray diffraction, and then ICP-MS and scanning electron microscope. Obviously, there was also a huge component for her to look at the geological context around these sites. So she did a lot of work as well to sample geological samples and look at raw material availability and the manipulation and modification of the natural resources to finally identify the paste preparation recipes. For me, it all started in the same way. So a look at all the corpus, all the vessels, probably a bit more in depth because that was my main analytical tool, looking in macroscopy with low angle lights to identify traces of techniques in terms of surfaces, so looking at topography, granularity, but also the general topography of the vessels, the cross-sections and the fracturation mode, and all of that can help us identify the methods of fashioning and then subsequently decorating and surface treatments. For a subset of 248 samples, I looked at surfaces with optical microscopy to validate my initial interpretation in terms of surface treatments. And then I also had the chance to work a little bit on some of Delia's data, including the mineralogical maps produced by ChemScan to look at paste compression and porosity. And for 2 Beaker samples, I could also use microcomputed tomography, and this was really helpful because I had a lot of trouble to identify the rough-out technique for these vessels. I should mention that all the results from her PhD and my PhD have been published individually, but what we are doing today, and this is a world premiere for you, we are combining this data to give you the final results of the project, basically. So how did that process unfolded of combining this data? First of all, so there was the identification of technical characteristics for each vessel of each assemblage. Then, on the basis of 4 hierarchical technical criteria, the ones that were most prevalent in these assemblages, we identified technical groups in each of these sites. And the groups with identical characteristics were combined into traditions, irrespective of the site or the chronology. And finally, on the basis of paste recipes, we subdivided these traditions into technopetrographic groups. I should mention that in addition to this work specifically on the pottery, we also ended up reevaluating the regional chronological framework because we quickly identified that it was quite complex to talk of relationships between sites and occupations if the chronology is a bit uncertain. And so we tried to specify that chronological range for each occupation as much as possible, and so that was done through recalibrating and doing the Bayesian models for all the sites that were available. And we ended up with what you can see on the right, which is this re-evaluated chronological framework for the area. We felt that it was important to start by showing the results that regard the paste recipes first, because that gives us one layer of understanding that gets a bit less visible once we look at that in terms of technopetrographic groups. The blocks that you can see here show when a recipe is present and in which type of site. What we observe is a variety of paste recipes during the period that directly precedes the Beaker phenomenon in the area. You can see we have a bit of chronological uncertainty for this phase, but still that variety is there. And strikingly, only 2 of these paste recipes were found in the Petit Chasseur necropolis. And these recipes were found similarly in 3 settlements located in a 5-kilometer radius from the necropolis, so not that far away. And those are paste class number 3. These were vessels that were tempered using coarse sediments that included metavolcanic rocks. And then paste class number 4, tempered with crushed rocks, in this case, calcite. After 2500 BC, we have the disappearance of about 65% of these recipes, and a strong focus on three main recipes. The first one is that has no clay modification or is evidencing the use of sieving. The second one is tempering with coarse sediments, and in this case, crystalline rocks from the Rhone Glacier morainic deposits. And the third one, similarly, but with metavolcanic rocks. Only the first 2 were found in the Beaker vessels that were deposited in the dolmens at Petit Chasseur, and they were found interestingly, in 4 settlements that were located between 20 and 60 kilometers away from the necropolis, further up the valley. And only one was located within a 500-meter radius from the site. So this trend continued during the early Bronze Age, so we still have the 3 main recipes, 2 in continuity with the Beaker period, and one that seemingly re-emerged from final Neolithic traditions, and that is paste that was tempered using coarse sediments that included amphibolite. Paste class number 2 is the only one that was found in the necropolis, although for the early Bronze Age, we have actually quite a long period of deposits of jars in the necropolis, so quite a lengthy use during the early Bronze Age, but we have only one paste class. So to summarize this first aspect of the study, so we see a progressive homogenization in terms of which material was selected and how they were then treated. Now onto the technopetrographic groups. Here you have a tree that summarizes our chaînes opératoires, basically, that identified during this project. We have 2 main categories. On the left, you can see the burnished ones, and on the right, the smoothed traditions. So the traditional level, technical tradition that I mentioned, is that one in the light pink. We see that we have 8 traditions identified, and then with the input of raw materials, we end up with 13 technopetrographic groups. There are 2 main traditions. For the burnished groups, we have tradition number 1, which is characterized by the use of coiling, burnished surfaces, obviously, impressed decoration made using indented tools and/or stamps. And so we have 2 technopetrographic groups, one with no clay modification or the use of sieving, and the other one that was tempered using coarse sediments of the type of crystalline rocks. For the smooth traditions, we have, it's the number 7 that you see here, these barrel-shaped jars with applied and/or finger-impressed cordons. We again see this coiling with the peripheral coil applied to the base, and these 2 technopetrographic groups, one tempered with crushed calcite and the other a bit more varied, so tempered using coarse sediments containing a variety of rocks, crystalline rocks, metavolcanic rocks, quartzite, amphibolite, or polycrystalline quartz, but all reflecting a similar technical choice of tempering using sediments. The first of these traditions is clearly associated with the bell beaker phenomenon. You can see it. These are the decorated beakers and cups. But it seems that this is also the case for a second one, which is tradition number 2. And that, in our opinion, is simply bell beaker commonware. And it's only distinguished from the former by the decoration technique and the fact that we have a third pace class appearing there with metavolcanic rocks. Now, if we look at those chronologically, to get the bigger picture, and I guess the results that you guys want. This time, we put the sites so that you can get an idea of the prevalence of these groups during each period. During the final Neolithic, we have a variety of technopetrographic groups. And interestingly, a majority of those are not pursued after 2450 Cal BC. Only 2 of them were found in the necropolis, 7A and 8B. 7A and 8A. During the bell beaker period, we have the emergence of 4 new technopetrographic groups, 1A, 1B, 4B, and 6. And the possible emergence of a 5th group, the one that I just mentioned, which would correspond to bell beaker commonware. The reason why Delia and I decided to consider this one as starting with the bell beaker period, even though, as you can see, the chronological range could very much cover the final Neolithic, is because this site is actually a sector of another site that has not been extensively published, has only 2 radiocarbon dates for the amount of levels that they have, and unless we are proven wrong for now, we consider that this is too unclear, and both of us, without concerting ourselves, came to each other saying, do you have the same impression than me? So yeah, we would consider this rather bell beaker. And again, these pastes are tempered with coarse sediments, crystalline rocks or metavolcanic rocks. The vessels are coiled, and we have applied and or impressed decoration. The vessels are burnished quite thin, and they have varied colors in cross-sections that correspond to what we often see for bell beaker vessels, so dark core and light inner and outer margins. What we also see during the bell beaker period is a privileged relationship between one settlement and the necropolis of Sion-Petit-Chasseur. And as you can see on the map below, interestingly, this settlement is the one that is located furthest east and upwards in the valley. These 2 technopetrographic groups are also the ones that are solely present during the bell beaker period. So we don't have an epi-bell beaker phenomenon happening in the Upper Rhone Valley. We have no transmissions of these styles and very heavily impressed decorations. With the shift to the Bronze Age, we observe multiple technopetrographic groups that originated during the final Neolithic and continued until this phase. And we have 2, possibly 3, groups that emerged during the bell beaker period that were pursued during the early Bronze Age. These are 4B, 6, and possibly 2. So yeah, here we can definitely see that there's an integration of these traditions in the local context. So the first thing that we can say is that the study of the chaîne opératoire of pottery from the region has proven particularly effective in identifying the dynamics of production and interactions between the sites and the evolution of these dynamics over time. We can also say that we have 1 technopetrographic group found with certainty during the entire chronological range, and that is 7B. So these sorry for that, these barrel-shaped jars that you can see here in dark blue. And And these, interestingly also, these were only found in the necropolis as part of the early Bronze Age deposits. So this tradition, this way of making vessels has been around for hundreds of years, if not millennia, but we only find it in the necropolis during the early Bronze Age. We can also see the disappearance of specific paste recipes and the abandonment of certain raw material sources after 2500 Cal BC, and the emergence of the bell beaker phenomenon in the valley. We also see the emergence of new technopetrographic groups during the bell beaker period, with 2 groups only in use during this phase, with no pursued influence into the Bronze Age, the decorated beakers and cups. And that obviously brings the questions of an arrival of new communities of practice at the same time. We see the continuity between the bell beaker period and the early Bronze Age for several of these groups, which shows a local integration over the long term, so people moved and they settled. And finally, we have this preferential relationship between the necropolis and a specific settlement during the bell beaker period, and that brings more questions of, as Mary mentioned, specialized craftsmanship, maybe commission production, so a single group producing for the entire communities in the valley, and intra-regional artifact circulation. I'm going to go back to the necropolis here and look at other fields. Maria has already highlighted some of these changes, but we can definitely see this shift in dolmen architecture with the disappearance of this triangular base. We have the change in stelae iconology, or yes, in typology, so to speak, with the disappearance of the Ramedello daggers and the emergence of these bow and arrows depictions. And with the Bronze Age, we have a complete shift. We move on to single graves. They are, as you can see, some of them dug in the decayed monuments. And we have an occupation of the necropolis that we could call more ritual or cultic, in the sense that we have mounds, successive mounds that are placed on top of some of these old dolmens, deposits of faunal bones and large jars. Additionally, the study of dental non-metric traits and strontium isotopes that was done a few years ago on human remains from the necropolis also revealed partial biological input among the individual buried with bell beakers, or in these bell beaker layers, and that several of these adults were non-local. All of that put together, these historical discontinuities, the partial biological input, the discontinuities in chaînes opératoires, well, we think that that reveals changes in the social and symbolic spheres, human mobility, and from our study, the arrival of new communities with traditions that were exogenous to the valley, people that move with their own know-how. And thus we can talk of a circulation of concepts and ideas. This is not new for the bell beaker phenomenon, brought in this case by mobile individuals that included potters. And then obviously the question is, from where? And I will just remind you of that map that Marie showed with these different necropolises in the area, and obviously that very clear connection between Sion Petit Chasseur and Aosta Saint-Martin-de-Coléon. And so this type of study could still very much be extended on the other side of the Alps. To conclude, we have discontinuities between the final Neolithic and the bell beaker traditions in the ceramic assemblages, but also identified in other fields, and thus indications of extensive cultural and societal changes during the second half of the 3rd millennium BCE that foreshadow the major shift to come with the emergence of the Bronze Age. And in that case, it's a whole different thing, the focus on the individual rather than the community, from collective to single graves. The fact that, I didn't mention this, but pottery is no longer part of the grave goods during the early Bronze Age, but pots are still deposited in the necropolis. Instead, the dead are buried with bronze weapons or ornaments. and then this ritual activity around the abandoned megalithic monuments of the necropolis. So I wanted to offer a few final remarks, talking about technical traditions and chaînes opératoires. I think they are truly crucial. They are a crucial layer of understanding for us in this reflection on the bell-beaker phenomenon, because they allow us to go under the skin of these objects that we mostly compare in terms of typology, revealing, I will be maybe a bit provocative here, their technical ancestry. Obviously, this cannot answer all of our questions, but it can help highlight contexts where cultural contacts were prolonged, deep, where we could talk of acculturation. This is a term that we've heard in previous talks, versus more surface-level contacts, where you just copy the style, but you still do it in your own way. And we can truly approach mobility and migration through technological analyses. And I hope I convinced you of the usefulness of this approach. Thank you very much.